I was listening to a conversation recently by Christopher Sideris. He had on a member, his name One of Few. They were going over essentially, with life here. There's plenty of things that we can look to pinpoint that just doesn't make sense. But in terms of it not making sense, it still is another cog in the machine, and we pretty much just let it continue to not make sense in an obvious way because it functions with our, status quo. So it's the insanity, to things here. And it leaves people like me and Chris and others, Rita, anyone that's in these, forms of mentalities, just wondering how the hell, why the hell, just asking, if anything, first off, questions. And many times those questions get ignored or refrained. And so from there, you have even more questions and concerns because it seems that, if anything, you feel trapped here, given the state of things. But personally, when looking in for where I'm at personally with things here, again, given just the whole sense of insanity, it made me think of the person or whoever it was that was the first sentient creature here, who had contemplated the question of, to be or not to be. And to also then solidify, to have a solidified position in choosing not to procreate. And of course, with this in particular being due to, them having a form of reasoning that's revolved around being, balanced and fair in their ways. My first thought, I would wonder, well, how did that awareness for that, first sentient creature being of that time, how did that even happen? And regardless, that person, being whoever, more than likely felt very outcasted in their community, wherever they were. Very much so. I can, assume that, given that form of mentality, it's very mutant to many things that they would be around. So, and we know this. We don't even have to, think about a time in the past. We know that right now. I'm sure the one listening to this, you or I, because I feel it myself. I feel as if I'm that, first sentient creature being within my, proximity of existence here in Earth, because, given the things of where I'm around, these types of points just are not cared about. So I do feel like that, the outcasted emotion or sense. Definitely feel that here. I'm sure people listening to this also, because there's just not many people, talking about this. But it's just, again, pointing out the very, very clear things in my eyes. It's not, doing much. But and even with that, given that, again, it's so clear, it's I've been pretty solidified in this stance for a while now. I've told people, I would say probably around 2017, when I really was on my stuff with this type of stuff with antinatalism and stuff. But before then, like I mentioned with some of my past videos, I was how can I say, in the political stuff. But with that, it gets within the conspiracy, right? Gets within certain waters where it's like, what the hell is this? Is the ultimate question you ask yourself when you review some of the things that have been documented in our world. It's like, what the fuck is going on? But the knowledge of antinatalism, Efilism, it really puts a lid on those types of conversations. It's still very fascinating and I don't even want to say entertaining and fascinating, but it's still a conversation to be had. But we should obviously, in my eyes, given where I'm at, I don't see how there is any bigger conversation without first, making sure everyone's on the same page, being aware that this shouldn't be at all at bottom. So let's start there and work our way back to where we are now. And I don't hear that viscerally enough with people that have enough knowledge to a lot of things here. But that's okay. That's okay. People that, know like myself in terms of just the most plainest truth that I see, will come to it, truthfully, because I came to it myself. I know I've been across the webs and stuff, and so people that have any inkling, they'll see people like you or I, and we'll let them, become privy to certain things, to their reality. But again, antinatalism, it puts a conversation lid on those very interesting conversations, again, with things like conspiracy theories, just to kind of put a blanket term. Because, of course, like it was in that conversation with Christopher, I believe it was the other person that was on the call with him, one of few. They were mentioning, of course, with that term conspiracy theory, and most people nowadays, more than, I don't even know how, I don't even know how to gauge anymore, but I would imagine that at least many people, have heard that it was something that was created by the CIA and was used to, subjugate and marginalize certain people that just question things. So people know that part too. And then still you have many, if not most, still obviously people that will look to bash somebody just because they use that term. So already it just shuts down thought. And it's very interesting how we're here, how we came here. I get it in a certain sense because people are very soft, I guess, because they don't want to, I don't want to say break the barrier and break the boundary, but just go to new horizons and expand their mind to more than what's just, here in the brute sense. Really digging from what's under and how things are, really functioning here and seeing it for what it is. People don't want to do that, it seems. And it obviously really pigeonholes anyone that would come to be of this, form of mentality. So it's very unfortunate, very unfortunate. And it makes me think with things like language, like, well, how did, I know with language it's an expression, but when it comes to the English language, stuff like in terms of the imposition, how, who, what, when, why, which I can, go back in time and see those times when, Indigenous men and women or whoever were now getting introduced to now this language and now having to be privy on certain, dialectics that they didn't have before and didn't need before. Already from that cuff, it's already an issue. It's already an issue being in a body, humanly formed especially, but in the incorporation of a, language like the English language, any of these languages, we know that it comes with law, right? It's the law of the land. And so with that, you will have things like jurisdiction. So now you have an imposition over you. Already you're within the, Mother Earth, but now you're having man that's wanting to create their own law over you in Mother Earth. And so again, it's just an imposition. I mentioned this a bit before, very briefly in the imposition and spirituality video I had. But if you guys may know, what's his name? Jordan Maxwell, but there's others, but you should get the point behind looking into things like maritime admiralty law, and just the legal terms of stuff. It's very sick. It's, with this language, we've always been told this, how it's twisted, the casting of spells. These are all real things because people are really, we're all mind controlled to some extent. And in an obvious sense, it starts in many respects to the language, to the linguistics, in terms of, how we talk to one another. But yeah, it's very interesting to think of how that actually started, because it's a clear crutch. It's like, why are we now having to say these words in this specific way? That should already let you know something's up, right? We already should know in civilization, already we get this. It's just depending on the person, you may fall in a certain area. The whole saying of going down the rabbit hole. Well, some people are still searching and are on their paths. But I mean, you have these sayings down the rabbit hole. Well, what's finally there, right? And I guess no one wants to answer that because they don't like the answer, but it's very simple to me. At the very least, it's just don't put somebody else here to have to go down the rabbit hole. I mean, what the fuck? But yeah, I just understand that things don't make sense, right? And there's a lot of nonsense here. And so it doesn't really matter who you are. Right? We should all know that there's something off, right? There's a sense that's off in this world. You can imagine, I'm sure you may have seen, it's like a meme it's like a dog in a burning room. And it's, just a room caught on fire. They're sitting down and they're saying, I'm fine. Well, that's us right now, for us as a whole. We're just saying that it's okay. It's okay given the state of affairs of things. And then if we say, oh, it's not, well, what are we doing? Not much. And so it's just, it goes to the insanity. And so again, at the very least, just don't put somebody else here to have to go through this mental toil, of having to think of what the fuck, who the fuck, why the fuck. It's just, and I don't hear that enough from people that have these forms of knowledge. Don't hear that enough. Because that's the ultimate way you save yourself, in my eyes, by not placing a part of yourself back here, just to be frank. But yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense. I feel like we always had a hunch for anybody. And from that, you kind of have to then explore the hunch. Why would you just ignore it? I can't. I've always had personally just like, what the fuck? And then from there, keep going. But some people stop. And I just wonder why. But these conversations typically don't get had. It's just black screens as we are doing now. But yeah, civilization in and of itself should already let us know. I mean, with these whole impositions, that's it just goes back to this whole issue, right? But yeah, we say that we have curiosity, right? People, we say humans, we are curious creatures. But really, I mean, I feel like this is the most, curious type of thing to do, is to contemplate you and why this is here. More than anything here, what is of the most curiosity than, the making and functioning and the reasoning for why life is life here. But more so than anything, it seems like it's, typically for most, when it comes to their curiosity, it's geared towards, mundane, trivial matters. And that's, I don't, care about controlling people. It's just, I just don't think people know a lot. And so to only care about that is very interesting. So I have a lot of appreciation for my fellow antinatalists and or Efilists, because for you to come to this, form of mentality, you've had to see certain things. I know there's certain people that study things like, metaphysics and other stuff, but there's just so many other connections for how you can come here. But I know, given that spirit of the person, especially those that would look to care to listen to me with how long I ramble, I know the spirit of that person is they are a very unique mind. I don't even know how else to put it. But yeah, it's just a lot of things that just never made sense. And so that's all that I make videos on, just trying to see, what sense do you guys that are listening to this have to say or see for yourself? In terms of another saying that we say as humans, that it's just a given assumption, is that, we say that we're good, right? That we're good people, right? That it's bad over there, not here, because I'm fine, right? I'm good. I try to embody truth in a commendable, form of honor and, service unto others. When that's, for the most part, for all of us, I'm in this with anyone, it's bullshit. And that's why, in turn, you don't put somebody to have to embody such a sense perception. I mean, I don't think that's saying much, but I don't know. But it just doesn't make sense to me, especially for those that are, like it gets said all the times with these conversations with religion. It's just, I do encourage any antinatalists, Efilists, if you have, came from a religious background, to still know about it, so that if you are given the opportunity of, providing this form of mentality, commentary to people that you love, you got to hit them where it hurts, and you got to hit them in stuff like religion, because we know what something like that is very significant, right, to most people that follow such a thing. And it's describing something that's ultimately not here, right? It's something greater than here. Well, then it doesn't make sense then to create stuff here for something out of here. If the ultimate goal is to get out of here, why then are you? And so already on that level, so it's not even like you have to hit the text. But if you do, I mean, that is just, you don't, it's kind of like, how I don't want to make this analogy, but, you're trying to kill a bug, and it's trying to, scurry away this way, that way, move the goalposts, essentially, right? Well, again, with that element going more further into those texts that you were brought up with, it's only further going to be able to have you get control of that conversation matter, and not have them, just move along this way or that way and try to control the conversations for themselves. So I think it's important. There's simple, sayings that we all have heard with concepts like selling your soul. And of course, more so than before than now, it was a heavy thing, like, wow, did they sell their soul? But it still is a thing people say and kind of emulate now, and it's still getting done. And with these concepts of, solar, it pretty much just goes back to the mind. It's just an awareness. That's the true light. And again, I just don't know why somebody would deliberately put somebody here. That's why these concepts like NPCs, and I mean, it's very, at the very least, odd. It's just very strange at the very least. As we know with antinatalism and stuff, it's just, you hear what people say, and it's like, are these really real people? I can't answer that. Ultimately, well, what is real? I don't. It's a oof. But but with that concept of selling a soul, it's kind of like, what is it like? It's saying that it's implying like a consequence, right? Because now with you having to sell yourself, right, in essence, there comes a consequence. There's a cost for that, right? And so this is something that's not ideal at bottom. And so there's a certain shame that you should get with it. In an obvious sense, you should be shameful if you sell your soul. I don't think this is saying much, Lord have mercy. But people do it. We all do it. But people do it to the most brute extent by, of course, placing an extension of their soul, aka procreation, placing somebody here. And personally speaking, and again, this is why I was going a bit into the religion aspect of things, I don't know how I could sit with myself personally. It doesn't even matter given the information I may know now more so than before. But personally, given what I know, I can't imagine. I can't imagine in good conscience doing that. Given, the knowledge that, and it's not like we're all within the same scope of things. It's just knowledge of yourself. If you have knowledge of yourself, then again, you kind of have to act accordingly. It's not even like, no, there's just certain things now that it's just of an order and you follow it. So I don't know. I don't know what people are doing here. But again, that whole concept of selling your soul, it's, yeah, of course, within our own livelihoods, we can do many things that we wouldn't necessarily want to do for our physical self. And in essence, then, right, selling our soul. But again, the most ultimate sense of that term stretched out is, placing another spirit of our own here to have to, do what we were doing in toil. So I think that is a important element. So make sure if, you get that thrown to you or, hear about that concept, know that everyone is in it for those that look to, of course, do that. So, no need to talk shit about a celebrity, talk shit about yourself. And it kind of just goes back with the religion, simple things like cattle worship, worship of the beast. That's what we're all doing in essence, but you have to pull the plug to some extent, right? I mean, people, like how I said before, we say that we're good people, right? Well, that means you have to act a certain way. So if you're saying now, with these simple things that, procreation, that's cattle worship. So you just can't get around it. It's a form of a sacrifice, okay? Because you are now using such sustenance, that's a life, cattle, and now you're taking it for your own life, which really, in that essence, you're not, life, you're the dead. And now you need the life for your own sustaining temporarily. So this sacrifice thing is very sick, and that's what gets involved with this creation here in this physical sense. And this is in the Bible. I'm sure most people here may have been Christian, so with the lamb, the bull, even, and the cow. You can look up other religions and stuff like what is it, Baal and Baal. It's just all going back to this sacrifice, right? We're in a sense exploiting something, and so relating it back now to a more visceral sense with things like the government, and I'm sure people hearing this have heard about the birth certificate cover up, conspiracy and all that shit, and how again it just goes back to exploitation. Sacrifice is exploitation. And then on top of that, I'm not sure for those that looked into it, I don't know why you wouldn't, if it's talking about how you're being sold as cattle. There's people that now argue that it's not a conspiracy, that if you're now questioning, why you have to have a birth certificate and if it's going to be used against you, for people that question the, the bad intent with such an orchestration. Now there's people that, that look to make debunked and, oh, you're not, right. And then they reference government issued documentations and websites, archives. And so it's all bullshit. It is all bullshit. And so it just kind of goes back to the language with me with, terms like bullshit. And again, with how I said with the cattle, worship of the bull. Well, clearly with that, there will come shit, as we know, with the fertile. And so with these terms, it's like, what the fuck is this? It's just such a trip. What is going on? But it's all bullshit, right? It's all bullshit. Like Chris Idaris says on his videos, it's a Dookie Boy robe. And it really is a Dookie Boy robe. We don't know how bad. I mean, we already know with the human body. If people that care about these types of topics enough, and you come across it yourself, and it's just life. I mean, you know how stenchy, filthy, musky, raggedy people, all things are, and so we try to abstain from that or tolerate it, but we know things for what it is. And so it's very interesting and funny. And with, the bullshit, right? Like with a lie, there's truth behind a lie. So with any of these concepts, I've come to appreciate and look to learn that truth, because it should connect back to yourself. Because any such said truth is in part, in many respects, just, describing yourself when we're talking about very scientific matters. And so when I, look at things like astrology, more so now than before, I find it even more interesting. And I'm even more compelled to learn more about it, especially even just given the fact that I'm looking to make a video in this specific time. Because there's definitely some truth to everything, things like reincarnation. It's just that, again, most people only know the lie part. They haven't digged enough for the truth. And that's really simple, because it's just describing you, in part the science of you, the creation of life, which is in part you. And so if you connect it back to that alignment, it's really, you should eat the meat, spit out the bones. It's not saying much. Like I talked about before with the selling of your soul. Well, clearly the most visceral sense of that is reincarnation, right? And that's just through the way of the sperm and egg, right? By having another spirit of our own placed here, but it's not us, right? We know that there's, what can I say? So with God, these concepts, it's like a fractal, right? It's kind of like the Russian dolls, right? It's not us now having to embody this new sense, perception, unique sentient experience. It's now our son or daughter. So, So these concepts, right, there's always a truth to it, but for most people, since most people are, done by the mass delusion of things, they may not know it or feel comfortable to say it or whatever. But again, that's just that. With these topics, with antinatalism and stuff, it is important to know that, of course, the you that you know you to be. So that's, of course, two yous removed from the original you. So that's you in the physical. That we know that we will come and go. We get that part clearly for us that are in that know. But in terms of that essence of you, right, that doesn't come and go. That's the true life, everlasting. And as we say with things, energy can't be, destroyed or can only be converted. Well, that kind of goes back to that whole God being a fractal. And so, with these other fucking subjects, all these subjects, again, it just goes back to knowledge of your own self. So I feel like a lot of times, again, people just get lost into the sauce with like cosmology, not so metaphysics. If someone is studying metaphysics, they kind of know what's up. But also with mythology, in part astrotheology, I made some notes here, psychedelics, occultism, the Kabbalah, even stuff like Christ consciousness, it's all just going back to you. So I definitely think that should be the first point. I mean, we can go further extrapolar and out there, but first let's talk more so about how this relates back to our life right now. And I don't hear that enough. But it's okay, because if you know the truth for what it is for things, and you don't need to hear it from somebody else, you already hear it for your own self. But yeah, it's just a lot of sense that doesn't make sense here, and it's very, very concerning. Very concerning, because again, with things like religion, which is very important, it doesn't have to be the case, right? As we know, you don't have to have morals and ethics to have to be in a religion. That's not required, right? They're not mutually exclusive. You can still know of what's right and wrong without having to now be imposed into an indoctrination of a certain religion practice, right? So, but even more so, if you're now dedicating your mind towards that type of faith, again, I can't personally, it doesn't really matter who you are. We all say that we're knowledgeable to some extent, right? We don't want to say that we're the dumb ones, right? So if we're saying these things, you're now boxed within a certain paradigm where now if you're not doing certain things in such ways, then again, I would not be, I am very fortunate, let me just say, to live my life and not yours, because for those ones that look to do something that's just obviously clearly sinful as procreating, I couldn't be the one. It kind of goes with concepts with like again, the word God. With that type of terminology, we should know that like we're not God then, right? So then why is it that we're okay with having something rule over us in a just clear, obvious sense? That's what that's saying. Doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. No one wants anyone to, in an obvious sense, be a slave. That doesn't, and so there's a certain, paradigm of that hierarchy placed, the Most High. So they're, we're the dominions, they're dominating over us. And so that it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense to how things should be whole, right? Balanced, fair. And that's not going to be the case if now you have a dominating, overarching overseer. Like, how is this a good scenario? Clearly, for most, it is, but it doesn't make sense. That's what we worship, really, dominance. Shout out to Wise Solace, great teacher. And yeah, he goes into this and many other people, but people like him, again, Wise Solace, for people that would care to look more into stuff that they already really should know, explains these type of things. And it's just, so again, with the Most High, you should know then, again, with the concept of God being a fractal, for whoever is the Most High here, in a clear sense, then they must have then fell somewhere else, because this is not the end all be all. Clearly, we always say that there's going to be a black hole, some type of, suction that's going to end this universe. And so we know this is not permanent already. But we're saying there's a God over this universe. Well, then that God's not permanent, right? And so in terms of having them, rise up to this paradigm, well, it must have been from how they say the fall of man. That's the original fall. Of course, with the concepts of Satan and Lucifer, that's the original fall. And now we're here with that energy. And so, again, that's describing the dominance more than anything. I just don't understand. And like we know with dominance, you have stuff like hunger, right? That's going to control and, have dominance over our lives. We know that viscerally, that with hunger, things like sleep, right? That's something that you can't control. We don't necessarily, like I mentioned with the misconceptions video, I actually removed the word misconceptions because I was like, these are all misconceptions. The who draws the line video is what it is now titled under. And it's just, again, going into, you don't have control. So things with hunger, again, you're now compelled to have to eat. Now, no one's saying you have to kill, the animal or the plantation, but we do that for our own sake because we want to feed the beast, literally, in that sense. And so it's nothing to celebrate. It's just nothing to celebrate from how I can look to see things here. So that I get so bamboozled sometimes. It's just crazy. So that's the pride. That's the pride of man. It's the pride of, this creator, whatever. They wanted to do their own thing. Because man, as, the one that's over man here, they know that they're connected to something higher. But they want to still play with whatever trivial games of life that gets played here and chase the butterflies and see the rainbows or whatever. So that's the pride. First off, is man saying, no to the higher God, the true, and that's a conversation. But essentially saying no to that higher sense. And now, no, let me play with my power here. And essentially with that, it's going to be very... It's death. It's death. You're playing with death. You're playing with fire, right? And so, the implications of it are crazy. That's why we see where things are today. So it's just ridiculous. And so with that pride, being the first fall, the sin, the 7 deadly sins, that's where it starts. That's where it starts with man. You have to get with people and see how really, if you're saying you're taking pride in this. Let me tell you, again, I wouldn't want to be you in terms of things like Judgment Day. Oof, if you follow religion, oof, wouldn't want to be you. But again, with things like desires, right? Really, if you have high desires, like again, Wise Solace, great teacher, your emotions are low. Something's wrong with you. Now, if you're wanting to do something as, in a clear sense, just insane as that, just insane. It's just you're doing the most biologically desirable thing, to do, but really it's not an emotionally balanced thing to do for any emotionally sane mind. It's not. So again, your emotional states are low when your desires are high to look to do things here. Because again, why? Why would you place somebody here to have to be now in this flux of these always changing emotions and ever needing needs and wants, and it's ridiculous. Now, in terms of the confusion to stuff, there used to be a time, right? Now we can't really contemplate it ourselves because we've always kind of been in this civilized, modern era and stuff. But that apparently, right, we had Indigenous for our ancestors, right? And so I've always tried to imagine how that life would be, and gearing more, towards it. For many people, they say, oh, I want to get back to nature, and there's many people that look to promote that, and that's great. But like I was saying for the initial start of this video, if you're here now, you're going to, I don't think I'm saying much, but I believe it's not my thoughts, right? It's not I've shouted out people, right? And so, but these words are not getting conveyed in this way oftentimes. So if you're hearing this right now, then hopefully I, put you onto something you may have not known or remembered, or, But what I'm saying is, from before, in the beginning, when I was talking about the original sentient creature, right, that was thinking of how this is not right, good for this to be, and consciously, deliberately abstain from placing another of themselves to be here. I wonder if that would be or had been an indigenous person, right? Well, how could they have processed such a contemplation is my question, because I don't know. I don't know how that would happen. For somebody given, obviously, with civilization, it makes sense why things like antinatalism is here. But if you're more so back within your own nature, more so like, I don't want to say like an animal, but in a sense it is. But animals are wise. Animals are one with nature. So with that, with things like with Christ consciousness, they are more that than we are. So you don't think of the certain things that now we're thinking of, given the state of affairs of how things are now. But again, that person or thing, whatever, had been very wise, because regardless, this is something that's unnecessary, and we know that. And it comes with need. So now you're doing something that's unnecessary, but comes with ever constant drowning needs. So it's clearly insanity. But again, for those prior people that were, more so in tune with things here, it's interesting because again, that is more so an element where you can be like, okay, yeah, you're fine here. You're not going to be thinking of anything, of these types of things, of life and how it's so, it makes me think of how they got to that point of, mentality of how we see things here. It's interesting. It is interesting. And even just how man became civilized, like I said, with the language, it's all, I wish the recording, the camera record, I just wish I was able to be there, because it's like, how can things get so bad? It's just so interesting. But again, they used to be more connected, and we know that that's not anymore in terms of us with nature and the animals, the terra firma. It's just not, and now we've come to this current state, and it's in part for when I look at those times back then, with the concepts we say with ignorance being bliss. So these sayings, right? It's just, there's always a bunch of bullshit. And so we say things like, behind a lie, there's a truth. And so with the saying like that, ignorance is bliss, I'm not necessarily saying this is all of the truth, but this is what I can say is geared towards more so of that than a lie. Again, with ignorance is bliss, we know that not necessarily this life is in and of itself ignorance, right? This life in and of itself, in a certain obvious sense, is awareness, right? It's consciousness. So it's not ignorance, right? So when we say things like ignorance is bliss, we are not ignorant to our actual lives, right? Because, we know that we're here now. So we're not, ignorant in that fact. We know clearly that, technically this isn't even the true life. So we're not, we know this is more so birth and death. So we're not ignorant, right? But more so, it's interesting when you, look at the bliss part. And so if you, look at how you say ignorance is bliss, well, then for that bliss part, when people say things like nirvana, the heavenly state, and now we're saying things like ignorance is bliss. So again, with bliss, we know that's like pleasure or joy, and truly the most blissful thing that you can look to do here, as we know, is by the way of orgasm. And so it's very interesting how these things are, how we say these things, because again, we're saying that, and it's true, right, that would be the case, that the bliss would be orgasm, and it is ignorant, right, because when you're in that state of mind, you're not thinking of anything here. I'm a man, so I don't, and I know most people listening to this are men. I don't even know, I haven't checked the numbers, but we know that state, and when you're about to reach it, you do not give a fuck about anything here, right, to be frank. And so it's definitely interesting because, you look at things about that. It's interesting. Like we know with concepts like the Bible, it says, in the beginning there was the Word and we were one with the Word. And these texts, saying the Word of God, it just goes back to man, right? As anybody that's, I'm sure, not in those conventional practices. No, that this just goes back to man. And with, the creation of man, it comes with the sound. Again, shout out to Y Solace, because I don't hear anyone saying this type of shit to the level that he does. And so with sound, we know that, with the way of orgasm, again, as a man speaking, I'm sure to many other men out here, we know that sound. And so with, when you look at, that's why I was saying from before, it's really, even at the very least, interesting and fascinating to see the level of profoundness certain texts are. I think I talked a bit about this with the prior religion videos that I talked about. It's very profound, but again, there's just a lot of ignorance given how the parables are, and people don't know how to connect things. But again, with the sound is a creator. That's where it starts. So again, you talk about orgasm, and we're saying in the start of such an ancient text and stuff like, the Bible's not that ancient, but it's very esoteric in many ways. It's saying how, in the beginning there was the word of God and we were one with that word. Well, it's very interesting, because if we're one with that word, and God technically is describing the unseen, so it's darkness. So out of darkness, of course, comes out that light through the medium of orgasm, right? But it comes through the way of sound. And I'm not going to emulate how that sound is, because I'm just not. But we know that sound, right? And so through that sound, being the creator, we get the, seminal fluid. And then with that, the sperm cell, the spirit that goes to the egg. And so I say that to say this is describing Earth here. And so with these concepts of God, with the fractal, that's describing Satan here, and so I hate saying these concepts, because I don't want to get too caught up in just one term of stuff. Like, you don't have to be of a religious practice to have to come to these conclusions, but it just goes back to the point of how this is a fall, clearly a fall by the way of sperm and egg. At the very least. So I just really appreciate these types of conversations more than anything, because again, I don't see it enough out here, and that's why I have my name the way my name is, being illicit mind. Really, it's just taboo, because it seems like there's just a bunch of stuff you just either can't say, or people don't want to say them. I don't know, and so it's just leaving people like you and I just around here saying, well, what the hell, what the fuck, why the fuck? Because I see myself in all these videos I post, because I'm not a social person at all in this context. This is really the only, maybe Discord, but this is really the only thing that I look to do for, other people than myself in the social context, by the way of the internet. And so I'm saying this to say that this is really involuntary. This is now, obviously it is for the benefit of others that are listening to this. But this is more so re-solidifying to myself, like, okay, I knew that I was, in the world, but I'm clearly not of this world. And in part, I'm exemplifying this to my own self, my higher self, that once I have my own quote unquote judgment day, I will see the true light in me being looked to shine across this world, and, giving myself the benefit of the doubt that, of course, I had nothing to do with this. I am not associated with this. Nothing, like as if I'm on track. Because this is crime. This is crime. This is, as we were born into sin. This is all sin. What can be worse than killing another life? And we do that every day. Okay, so this is all sin, and you gotta clean yourself. You know how in certain shows and stuff, when people know they're about to die, they do certain, because we know this mentally. Like, you have to be one with people, balanced, fair, honest, whole, and there's clearly not that here. So I'm doing this clearly for my own sake, but for others that are in a similar path, that can look to have others do the same, in a ripple effect. Because this shit is crazy. I think that, especially for the people that are in the truth community, it's very, I feel like, intentional, given how many of them are not really pushing the needle or just wanting to close down conversations. How is it not coming down to this type of mentality? So for people that are antinatalist, Efilists, and they may not go within the woodworks of certain stuff, that's fine, because you don't have to, right? It's the spirit within you, and so it's getting to understand certain things, and from there you use that wisdom to, again, act accordingly. And so if you're acting accordingly, that's life, right? You don't have to know of all these different forms explaining of life, you're that. So real will recognize real, right? And then from there, truth recognizes truth. From there, the you know, what is it? The lie divides out, right? Lucifer divides out from the truth, but we know what truth is. Then from that, the lie can come out, divides, but ultimately it goes from truth into lie. And so with this, we know that's a fall. Just language in and of itself is a lie, right? Just think about again, this is a lot of this I've already shout out Wise Solace. Again, I would recommend it, especially if you're listening to that brother has a lot to say in many simple ways. Again, they're just describing things that in many parts we all would know in many respects. But again, it's not being mentioned at all to the effect that somebody like him looks to showcase and share onto others. But again, we know that with other types of life, just think about it. How can another animal lie? They don't. Only man lies. So already from the jump, we know that we lie as a concept. We lie to ourselves. We lie so it's like, why would you do this now to another person here? To place them in this, situation where they're going to inevitably, just by language alone, language can get twisted, and now someone can think you're lying, and all this is just trouble and worry. And so, again, if we say that we are knowledgeable, we're good, this, that, and we say all these nice, fuzzy things, again, we have to act accordingly, right? We can't just talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. So really, really, you should know that there's nothing here to do. There is nothing here to do, that this is not the ultimate life. And so from there, and so I just look to embody that. Hopefully you are too, and hopefully more can. But yeah, I made the title having to fit in this world as an antinatalist. With these titles, it's not like I had to specifically explain that. If you've gotten to this point, and if you get the reason why I'm saying having to fit into this world as an antinatalist Efilist, you should get the point for that title. Given what I've already said, there was a prior video I've made for the honesty with antinatalism and the deception with trauma. I mean, if you have any mind, you should already know, if you know antinatalism, the honesty that comes with the concept to antinatalism and the deception to trauma, that we all get traumatized here. Birth is already traumatic. The very fact that you know that you're going to die is traumatic, and that it's something within you constantly here. So again, that is why it's there. Because again, we have to fit into this world, and it's not cool. It's not cool. You're going to be an outcast to some extent here. And that's okay, because you can go back to the true home, because this is not home. This is not home. And again, if you know things like astrology and stuff, I just think it's just crazy how I'm actually caring even to, post this type of stuff out there, given the state of affairs. This is all, the synchronicities are very interesting. I'll just end it there.